All right, everybody. Nick, good morning. Nicholas Chamberas is with us. And as promised to my Russian speaking listeners, we're recording one, streaming one in English. Nick is in Europe. I am in Brooklyn. Nick, good to see you.
Good to see you, Yuri. Good morning. How are you? You're looking well.
Yeah, it's a new year, of course.
I just want to wish to everyone who's celebrating a happy Rosh Hashanah, Leshana Tova Tikatievu. And I hope I didn't mangle that too much. Thank
Not,
you.
not too much, just properly.
Thank you.
So, listen, it's just a somber topic today. What's the repercussions all over the world as you see it? And you are in Europe and you're there for some time, so you can compare. Did it make any waves? The heinous murder of Charlie Kirk, a young man of 31 years old, here in the United States.
Yes, of course. Charlie Kirk was known throughout the world and very popular, very respected. And even those who disagreed with him, I think they valued the principle of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and the fact that he insisted on making his expression and speech and disagreements respectful, polite, and civil. It cost everyone. Of course, worldwide, there are these fanatic factions, globalists, the fanatic globalists, the totalitarians, different camps, and they can't stand free speech. They can't stand. They can't stand disagreement, civil, polite disagreement. So they have to shut everyone down. And some of them had very nasty reactions, similar to what you saw in the United States, similar to what some demagogues in the Democratic Party said about Charlie Kirk. But what was refreshing is the amount of people from disparate political factions just coming to his defense. And, in the United States, we're on the precipice right now. I must say, as you know, I've talked about Antifa for a very long time. I've talked and written about their danger to society, but I did not expect the vitriol, the disgusting attacks, the refusal to let this man's family mourn in peace. The level of hatred even surprised me, I have to tell you.
Yeah, is it kind of a mainstream, or because you, unlike me, I am very partisan. You says it all on my cap, but you're trying to get the feel of the entire kind of field game and what's going on in different media in different stratas or strati, right? I guess of population. Uh, and so, what's the feel altogether? Because I don't see too much. I mean, I think that the conservative media still filters out a lot of nastiness just for the appropriateness of that, as the lots of memes with Charlie Kirk being shot the exact moment when the bullet pierced his neck, and the various captions attached to that. That is go for a joke in the era of Jimmy Kimmel's and Steve Colbert's.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert are not funny. If their job is to amuse people by being humorous, well, using that logic, the New York Knicks should hire me as their next starting center. I have about... look, they're not funny. They're funny to deranged political fanatics who absolutely hate President Trump and want to see him out of office and want to harm everyone and anyone who disagrees with them. Yeah, maybe they find him funny. Most people don't find him funny. They don't find them funny. Stephen Colbert's departure, for example, was purely a business decision. They're paying this man tens of millions of dollars. You're having like home shopping network segments getting his kind of ratings. That was a business decision, but he has to cloak it that he's a martyr And of course, Jimmy Kimmel has survived by kissing up to higher ups who venerate the radical left. He needs to impress them. He's done a great job. Entertaining audiences is a different question. But Jimmy Kimmel, as many of you know, we found out last night, he's going to be coming back on the air tonight. This is a huge opportunity, not only for Disney and Jimmy Kimmel, even though many were disappointed that he's coming back on air, myself included. I think it's too soon. But look, I'm a free speech advocate. I support the First Amendment. I support freedom of expression. We should be respectful. We shouldn't taunt people. Now, I think it's too soon, but I think it's a huge opportunity for Disney, for Jimmy Kimmel, to perform a much needed reset for their program. If Jimmy Kimmel comes on the air tonight and he apologizes to the Charlie Kirk family and he seems contrite and ready to attract a wider audience, if he strikes a unifying tone, I think that'll be great for Jimmy Kimmel's career. I think that'll be outstanding for Disney. And then it'll contribute to the healing in our country.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most important part. I couldn't care less about Jimmy Kimmel's career or the well-being of the Disney company, although it's important in light of the various pension funds, having investments in Disney. So that's our duty as Americans, to be caring about the companies, huge companies that seem to be successful, and all of a sudden things happen, and the precipitous decline suddenly befalls this or that giant. And Jimmy Kimmel, of course, to me, those people mentioned here, Steve Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, they deserve the harshest punishment available in this land, because they are the grave diggers. They dug the grave for American comedy. They're not funny, and they are proclaimed funny, and this is pure situation of the new emperor's new clothes, right? Is it the tale goes? They all being claimed to be praised as the greatest comedians, and they're not. They're not funny at all. And you look at the American comedy of the days before, olden days, and you just weep. I just weep. I laugh, and then I realize where we are compared to that.
Well, they have, again, I don't find them funny. There's crossing a line. I find a lot of the positions of the radical left dangerous and frightening for the future of our country. We have to agree to disagree. There's a line you cross when you basically attack the dead, and not just someone who died. A young man who was 31 years old. He had a 1-year-old boy. Amazing wife, mother, sister, so many relatives, so many friends, and he didn't seem to have a mean bone in his body. He had some kind of online feud with Van Jones, and we found out a few days ago that he had reached out to Van Jones to go onto a show. But again, you cross a line when you mock a dead person publicly, and you say not only harsh, insulting, vile things about this person and about how they died, but then you go on the air and you lie about the circumstances of this person's death. Can you imagine? And I don't want to give you specific examples because then they'll be misconstrued, but can you imagine if it was Gutfeld lying about a historical incident about who was responsible for the death or murder of someone that the left or liberals venerate? Can you imagine what would have happened? So just some background on Jimmy Kimmel. The reason they took Jimmy Kimmel off the air is temporarily. His ratings are awful. As a matter of fact, as of last night, Sinclair Broadcasting will preempt his show. A lot of stations will still refuse to carry his show. That's why I'm saying now is the time for Jimmy Kimmel to put this nonsense to rest so we can start to heal and move on. He had low ratings. He went on the air in the wake of a horrific, brutal assassination, a young man murdered in front of his family, and he lied. And he went into whataboutism, trying to mitigate. We don't mitigate brutal murders in this country. We learn from them. That's what we should do. So tonight, like I said before, Jimmy Kimmel and Disney have a huge opportunity. They can be apologetic. They can be contrite. They can strike a unifying tone. If they do not, then our response should never be like the ugly response of these radical leftists, Antifa. But if they're not apologetic, if they don't show contrition, then we have no choice but to boycott them. If we don't boycott them, if we ignore this, then it's open season on everyone else. We must show that there are business consequences to what you say. You have a right to say something. It doesn't mean that I have to pay you for it or that you have to pay me to hear it. We cannot allow the impression that you can have internationally recognized performers, people who are paid tens of millions of dollars a year, go on live on the air or not even live, and just smear people who are considered a hero by millions of young Americans, by millions of Americans in general, and people all over the world. This cannot stand. We cannot accept it. Disney and Kimmel must apologize. They must show humility and contrition, and that's how we move forward from here. Colbert can take victory laps all he wants. He's going to be off the air soon. And maybe he can learn, maybe Jimmy Kimmel can show Colbert a thing or two about learning from your mistakes, because clearly Mr. Colbert has not learned from his mistakes regarding this situation.
I wonder if the Kimmel situation would have a probability of reaching the heights of, I think it's the one to reach the heights of the Bud Light debacle, but at least the Cracker Barrel level would be good.
If they go on the air and act business as usual
and double down on this, yeah,
and keep spouting outright knowing falsehoods, we have no choice. We have to make Bud Light look like a walk in the park for the company. There is no choice. I don't want to alarm anyone. I don't want to overstate the situation, but do you understand how many disturbed young individuals these people may have radicalized and fanaticized, and we don't even know about it? This is not acceptable. You don't have people in the Republican Party calling the other side evil, fascists. Pick up a history book. Weren't Nazis and fascists evil people? Of course they were. They were horrific human beings. Should we have sympathy for Nazis and fascists? Absolutely not. Is someone who disagrees with you about economic policy a fascist or a Nazi? Absolutely not. Is someone who says that, you know what, we shouldn't let 20-year-old men go into little girls' bathrooms? That's common sense. That's not fascism. That's not Nazism. But it's all part of the radical left's operation. They want to fanaticize young people. They don't want to have a conversation. They just want to be able to shout slogans and slurs, because let's face facts here. We should respect everyone, whether they're gay, straight, bi, trans, anything they identify with. We must treat people with dignity and respect under all circumstances. At the same time, if the Antifa supporters, if the radical left has this conversation, has a national, international conversation about, does it make sense to require parents to transition their 8-year-old child, they're never going to win that argument. 99 out of 100 times, you're going to have people saying it makes absolutely no sense to give puberty blockers to little children. It makes no sense to transition them. And you know what? In order not to get 100 out of 100 people, you're going to have these conversations in an insane asylum, because most people don't really know what transitioning is. Most people don't really know the actual biological, physical effects of doing this to young children. So that's why the left, they have to dehumanize people. They have to make them into these villains. They don't want to have the conversations. I mean, do you really think that you look at Lance Twiggs, the companion of Tyler Robinson,
the furry,
this murder, right? Let's keep it real. This is not a situation where a little kid is saying, "Oh, you know, they identify with a certain animal, which is cute." When you have grown adults thinking that they are part of another species. Oh, coincidentally, this young man allegedly was using a lot of drugs. And I don't mean aspirin. It's no coincidence.
Or Tylenol.
Right. They want, you know, they're using these troubled individuals to unleash a reign of terror on people who disagree with them. Enough is enough with the name calling. Let's have a conversation. And that's what Charlie Kirk embodied. You know, I briefly met, only once, I met Charlie Kirk when he was just 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew there's just some people you meet, you know they're going places. And he didn't look physically older for his age, but he was very mature for his age. Definitely more mature than most 23-year-olds at the time, more mature than most 30-year-olds. He carried himself very confidently, but he wasn't arrogant. And it's very rare in politics to encounter someone who is that intelligent, that articulate and confident without them being arrogant or coming off as arrogant. And the way forward, you know, is to have civil discourse. I just find it absurd that people can unfriend each other, and for actual friendships with each other, dislike each other based on political disagreements. I find that one of the stupidest. I mean, there's some issues. Look, there's some issues where, we don't need to go into it, but there's some issues where, you feel so passionately about, you feel so strongly about, you can have a friendship with this other individual since they disagree with you. Yes, but I don't think any of us, I don't think Erica Kirk agreed with her husband, Charlie Kirk, 100% of the time. It's not normal to always agree. But can we at least acknowledge as a nation unanimously that it's wrong to murder someone for their political beliefs? Can we stop the whataboutisms that, well, what about this and who did that? And nonsense. There's only one side encouraging violence. Now, are there terrible...
Now you're doing it, one side. Yes, everybody who killed for political reasons during the last 20 years, basically, 99% are Democrats.
Yes,
that's a fact. How can you argue with that? They can argue with that.
They try. I assure you. You know, I was on social media the night of Charlie Kirk's murder, and I try to avoid arguing with these people, because if someone has, you know, good intentions from the start, if they just have a real disagreement, I don't mind exchanging. But when I know that someone just is predisposed, comes from a certain camp and has a certain objective in mind, I tend to avoid exchanges. But I couldn't help it that night. I mean, you had these people, like, what did they think they were? Like the rhetorical Praetorian Guard of Antifa? They were just coming on and saying, well, what about this? Well, what about that? I mean, can you imagine? Just someone has been shot in the neck on television in front of thousands of people, and they're saying, well, 30 years ago, this happened. There was this bombing. You know, Justice Brett Kavanaugh was almost murdered. Most people have no clue how close that man came to losing his life by a depraved human being, at the hands of a depraved human being. And it's time to stop. I don't care what you believe. You should not be murdered for your political beliefs, period. I think we need to start from that premise in our country in order to move forward.
Mm. Listen, this is interesting. The situation that our country, to put it mildly, we found ourselves in, as we have to have a conversation, but it's a conversation that is very short between the two sides. It's very short because we have the facts and we have the history, and we have the. How can you argue that not a single homeless man was advertised as getting COVID during the COVID pandemics? Not a single one. They were all in the middle of this dirt, never washed, never anything, living in the arms of each other, and sniffing the whatever powder they could get off the sidewalk, and they never got a COVID. Can you argue with that? They didn't get vaccinated either.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because and again, this was part of the dehumanizing, the vilification of people. There is a scientific basis for supporting vaccines, no question about that. There's also, depending on the vaccine, depending on the regimen, there's also scientific studies saying you shouldn't take certain vaccines. There you go. Discuss, argue to your heart's content. Do not say the science is settled. That's an oxymoron. Science is never settled. If it's settled, it's not science anymore. We knew, for example, from a groundbreaking Israeli study, that people who had experienced COVID and recovered had enormously more resistance, natural resistance, than someone who had just been vaccinated, or than even someone who was vaccinated. Yet they tried forcing people to take the vaccine. Now, it's funny you mentioned that, because do you remember what Jimmy Kimmel said we should do with the so-called unvaccinated for COVID?
No.
Oh, really? You're so much luckier than I am in this respect. You just don't have to watch these people,
because I'm following the straight and narrow.
Look, I mean, I watched this. I watched this, and this man, he reaches, well, he doesn't reach a lot of people, but not nearly as many as he should. But they give him this gigantic, ginormous platform, and tens of millions of dollars to spread his propaganda. And he basically said that if unvaccinated people show up at the hospital for a heart attack, let them die. So, you have that statement, which I'm sure is fresh in the minds of many, mine included, because when he started this crap about lying about who killed Charlie Kirk, it brought back memories of when he was saying that unvaccinated people should die. So it's not strange, people like Colbert and all the whack jobs that want to make Jimmy Kimmel a hero. It's not abnormal for business people who sell advertising for these subsidiaries to be like, hey, this guy is saying that tens of millions of people should just drop dead and be refused care if they go to the hospital. He's also knowingly, falsely claiming that a member of MAGA murdered Charlie Kirk. You think that there's a chance people will just stop watching this show? Consequently, since businesses know that people aren't watching this show, are they going to pay the advertisers the fees they're used to getting? No, of course not. So they had to rally behind Jimmy Kimmel, but now it's up to us. And you know what? Look, if Jimmy Kimmel wants to go out there and celebrate the murder of Charlie Kirk, now look, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. It is well established that a leftist lunatic, a radical leftist lunatic, a heinous human being murdered Charlie Kirk. There is no question about that. Any wacko conspiracy theories notwithstanding. However, if you want to be a degenerate, a deranged person, and you want to allow Jimmy Kimmel to go up there and celebrate Charlie Kirk's death, fine. It's up to everyone else to boycott if that happens. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I remain hopeful that Jimmy Kimmel will strike a unifying tone. But if you want to have that person go up there, fine. It's up to us to click off, shut the channel, change the channel, don't watch the channel, don't look at the segment, don't give them engagement. That's our responsibility, because if we don't do that, then this is just the beginning. I mean, it's great that let's face it, it is amazing that President Trump won, and in a landslide, which, as we all know, anyone watching the show, I predicted a year and a half before it actually happened, even before the primaries. But as I said, it's wonderful that President Trump won in a landslide. These few years will pass. The radical left is bunkering down. They are preparing for a war of attrition. We have to change the chapter. We have to move on. We have to make it clear that no, you can't have your hat ripped off because it says MAGA or anything. I don't care if your hat says Donald Trump, Kamala Harris. You have a right to wear that hat. Do you remember, when was it, in the 2000s, when all these kids were going around wearing those Che Guevara T-shirts? You remember?
Yeah, that's endemic. That they come.
Yeah. Now, President Trump isn't responsible for deaths. Che Guevara oversaw the horrific and designed the horrific slaughter of countless innocent people. Did anybody ever bother those people for wearing that? No.
My favorite example here, you can see it on Brighton Beach Avenue here in Brooklyn. You walk into any store, they sell ice cream called USSR, CCCP. It says on it. So, and it's like Third Reich, tiramisu. You wanna see it in your store? I mean, you don't want to.
Again, that has a lot to do with ignorance, and that's why it's up to us to change the tone. It's up to us to say enough is enough. Colin Kaepernick, for example, I thought what he did was terrible. I thought
he's forgotten already. Now you have to bring his name up.
Horrendous. Misguided. He has a right to his opinion. If you were to tell me that the NFL refused to play him because of his views, which is not true, a lot of people don't know. Some quarterbacks, they have a longer career than others for various physical reasons. He just didn't seem to have it anymore. He has a right to his opinion, as I have a right to my opinion, as you have a right to your opinion, but we have to respect each other. And we should never even think of trying to not only condone violence or explain violence or encourage violence. Look at the House. Did you follow the Charlie Kirk resolution? On the House floor. So they made
where they didn't want to vote, and there was only 2 Caucasians that voted against it, right? As Ocasio-Cortez said, the only 2 white people voted against it.
I just have no reliance on anything Ms. Ocasio-Cortez says. Sometimes I think she's cosplaying, because this resolution condemned Charlie Kirk's murder and also encouraged Americans to unite. Not exactly a controversial statement. When the House put forth a resolution earlier about condemning the horrific murder of those lawmakers in Minneapolis, and the couple particularly, every Republican voted in favor of the resolution, which makes sense. Like I said, we must condemn physical violence. We must condemn harassment. This time, almost half of the Democrats, when it came to the resolution to condemn Charlie Kirk's murder, almost half of the Democratic caucus refused to vote in favor. A lot of them abstained, and 58 of them, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez included, 58 of them voted against the resolution. That's not acceptable. So that's why we need to keep up the pressure. It's great that we're getting that Turning Point USA is expanding, but we have to make the point. physical violence, assassinations are not acceptable. Because if we don't, it's only going to encourage it. And I understand some well-meaning elected officials go on the air, go on social media and write political violence. Please stop calling the Charlie Kirk assassination political violence. Political violence is when some deranged person rips a poster out of your hand or takes your hat, right? That's political violence. This was a gruesome murder. It was an assassination, and we have to keep saying it. We are not saying we could, of course, we condemn political violence. This was not an act. This was a barbaric act. It took a life. It took away a husband. It took away a father. It took away a son. It took away a brother. We need to focus on calling it what it is: murder, assassination. Leave the political violence talk for when the wacko Antifa people and the BLM people show up. Leave that for those kinds of descriptions. I mean, please.
Nick, I have a question, which is a big question, but I appreciate if you could touch upon this fact. Judging by the memorial for Charlie Kirk, the religion, Christianity in particular, but it's not limited to this one only, is becoming more and more powerful within the ranks of U.S. government on the very top.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
The role of Christianity was very elevated, seriously elevated during the memorial service. And what do you think? Would the governing of the United States, at least one branch that is called the executive branch, would it be more along the lines of the scripture? Would it become less kind of separation for church and state, which a lot of people would welcome nowadays? Not separation, but being closer to the Ten Commandments to begin with.
I think we need to keep in mind that our civilization and our way of life, our way of government, was founded on Judeo-Christian values. And no one wants a theocracy, for crying out loud. Obviously, no one would advise that. I think we need to be careful about this, about what separation of church and state means. Do you want to force an agnostic to learn about the Bible? No.
I would strongly recommend it. Right. You cannot be an agnostic if you don't read Bible. You haven't read Bible and discussed it at least with himself or herself.
Well, you can refuse. You can just refuse to educate yourself about something. You don't need to look into it. And then there's those people like atheists who reject it out of hand. We need to get back to encouraging good moral character in the public schools, which is something that, because of the radicalized teachers unions across the country, we've gotten away from. I saw a sign for a middle school. These are kids 11, 12, 13 years old, and they're talking about Queer Month.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you just teach people to respect each other, to accept each other, and to be better people? Why does everything have to be about labels?
That was the plan initially. Believe it or not, there was a plan.
Right?
It was the plan.
And what is being thrown on, and it's a shame, because the Republican Party, we need to grasp this a little bit more than we do, because it's not the 1980s. Half of the kids don't go to Catholic or private school. A lot of children have to go to public school. And thank God when I went to public school, because my parents certainly couldn't afford to send me to any parochial school. Thank goodness that when I went to public school, I received a good education. I had no clue the political leanings of my teachers, nor should I have. I had absolutely no clue who they supported for president, who they wanted to become president. Now we're seeing, we have curriculum that, we've touched on this in your program again. We have 5-year-olds being forced to read things that when 45-year-old men and women try to read in a public forum, they're tackled by security because it's considered obscene language.
Right.
But somehow, some way, this has become normalized for little children, which is scary. And, we can have a much longer conversation about what that leads to and what that causes. But yes, the separation of church and state is misunderstood in this country. I actually triggered a woman, and I certainly didn't want to, but a friend of mine was outside of a church handing out their campaign literature from a safe, respectable distance.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman, I guess, had attended the service, and she was threatening to call the police. And she and her companion were very aggressive. And it's just amazing. Like, instead of just having this conversation, immediately she just started making threats and everything. And she threw separation of church and state and the First Amendment, and I said, okay, Ms., can you please, I'll pull up a copy of the Constitution, and can you please let me know where the words separation of church and state are? I'll wait. She freaked out, started these insults, as I recall. Yeah, they walked away. We need to be a kinder, gentler, more compassionate nation.
Yeah.
And
what about the ignorant people who stick to their ignorance and they
yes, but a lot of this falls with the Democratic Party because they do not have the will to stand up to these lunatics. It has been basically 12 years of appeasement and accommodation. And there's no appeasing these lunatics. They will not stop until they get rid of the First Amendment. Like I said, for all these pernicious, crazy ideas that they have about how they want society to progress and evolve, it can't stand up to conversation. It can't stand up to
they have no cards, that someone said. They have no cards to play with.
Right. And that's why they have to dehumanize us. And it's also why I was very pleased to see that the Trump administration has labeled Antifa officially, as of yesterday, as a domestic terrorist organization. We should be clear. Look, wherever violence comes from, whether it's the left, the right, in between, anybody, violence of any kind should not be tolerated. We should all be treated with respect. And we should all be safe, and we should all feel safe. It would be a foolish mistake to ignore the fact that these groups, whoever is funding them, I don't know, just pop up out of nowhere and terrorize people. Did you see those I don't even know, like, if they're real BLM or whatever. Did you see those clowns? They walked about, I don't know, 50 yards to spew vile epithets about Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Death. Who's paying for these people? Because please don't tell me, like, they didn't go to an insane asylum. Like, yeah, let's cut the crap, all right? Like, who really thinks that Charlie Kirk was a racist? And, who would really take such joy in, I won't repeat, obviously, what they said about the bodily functions and his grave, but these people are paid. They're paid agitators. And
yeah, unfortunately.
And people have a right to protest.
Unfortunately.
But we should have a right to walk down the street, say what we want respectfully without being assaulted.
Nick, let me ask you one question. Is there a chance that the Antifa is a terrorist organization and a campaign of Zohran Mamdani can have sponsors in common, the supporters in common?
There must be a chance. Yeah. Look, I'm not saying that I know for a fact that any of Mamdani supporters are terrorists. But extreme views attract extreme people. And we have a responsibility. I don't want to tell people what to say. But when you call someone a fascist, there are those who will believe it. You might think it's funny. You might think it's part of the political rhetoric. You're a Nazi. You're a fascist. You're scum. You're this. You're that. But think about it. If you encountered a real Nazi in front of you right now, how would you feel? You'd feel angry. You'd feel disgusted. You'd feel ashamed about having that person in your presence. Obviously, as you should. Now, a real Nazi is not someone who supports tariffs or opposes tariffs or wants more intervention in Asia or less intervention in Asia. But these people, anytime you disagree with them on any issue, it could be anything. Immediately, they throw out the racist accusation, which is, I mean, again, think about it. Think about what a horrible person you are if you're a racist. What a hateful degenerate you are if you're racist. But they just call anybody racist. You know, you have to be lockstep with their views, or they feel free to just trash your reputation, to just utter the worst insults that they can think of because they feel entitled. And this has to stop.
Nick, thank you so very much. Thank you for your appearance.
I do want to close with this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Tyler McCoy spoke at Charlie Kirk's memorial, and he quoted Soren Kierkegaard. And I want to close with this, and I want your audience to remember this. The tyrant dies, his rule is over. The martyr dies, his rule has just begun. Long live Charlie Kirk.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, my friends. Thank you, listeners and viewers. See you all tonight in Russian. All the best, Nick. We miss you here.
Thank you, Yuri. Take care.